tonight. We're going to go ahead and get started. Before we do, I just want to talk about a few things that we have on the agenda for this month on the 29th. Again, in this room, the AAUW is going to sponsor a GMO discussion panel. They're going to have two people on the pro side and two people on the anti side come in and talk about different GMO issues. So I don't know the time offhand. I'll get that to you before the end of the night. But again, that's going to be on the 29th. That's a Thursday evening. Okay, I hope you can join us for that. Also tonight, we're very fortunate to have 3 candidates who are running on our island, and they'd like to come up and share just a few minutes of your time with you. So we're going to welcome to the stage first Ms. Carrie Peterson-Marks. She's running for Hawaii County Council District 2. For those of you not familiar, that's pretty much this area here, Waiakea, University of Hawaii, Waiakea House Lots area, so down by the airport. Please welcome Ms. Carrie Peterson-Marks.
We love Carrie!
We'll find out.
That's what we want to hear.
Aloha!
Aloha.
So yes, like she said, I am Carrie Marks. I live in Hilo Town proper. So it's pretty much downtown Hilo all the way up around the Saddle. That's my area, and I'm running for County Council District 2 this year. So please vote for me. Please tell everybody else to vote for me. I stand for accountability, transparency, and action. Those are my key words this year. Many of you may recognize me. I'm the one that shows up in a lot of the county council and board commission hearings and records them and puts them on YouTube. So that's what I've been doing the last couple years. In addition to lots of different issues, I've done a lot of work around the GMO issue and helped getting the ban passed for the GMO ban here on Hawaii Island. And I've also been involved in a lot of the energy issues and education. I have 3 kids. I have 4 kids. I have 4 children. I have a lot of children still in the house. I have an older daughter on the mainland. I have a 27-year-old daughter that lives in Chicago, and I have 3 kids here in school. I have a daughter, Denver, who's at Hilo Inter, and twin fraternal boys that are at Kaumana. So that's who I am. I'll be here all night. I'll be available. I have a volunteer meeting tomorrow. If anybody's available to help me sign wave or knock on doors or do anything, I'm having a meeting tomorrow at 3 o'clock here in town. And you can come and ask me about it, and I'll let you know where. Thanks for the time. Aloha.
Okay, we're lucky enough tonight to also have one of the candidates who are running in District 4. Please give me a warm welcome to Roy Lorenzo.
Lozano.
You guys won't forget now since I made the mistake, right? Roy Lozano.
Actually, I like to be called Dr. Roy Lozano. I was the first Hispanic in my family to get a college education, so I actually am proud of that. I'm a chiropractor in Pahoa. You know, I think back to 236 years ago, right before Captain Cook came, and the Hawaiians were completely sustainable. Now, we will never get back there again, but we certainly can aim for there. Thank you, Doctor. I have a very spacious life. I work Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and 4 days I have off, and I meditate 4 days a week. And it was in meditation that I just would come out of meditation. I remember he voted for biotech. He voted for biotech. Our representative right now in District 4, and that was why I did it. I stepped up to run for this. I don't have a lot of experience in politics, but I'm a pretty sharp guy. I know how to study. I know how to analyze information, and I have an incredible circle of humanity. Lynn and Jeff, Toby, I got so many people, Mary, I got so many folks in my circle of humanity that I'm not going to do it alone. I'm going to do it with the whole crew, and thank you very much. I have some flyers if anybody has interest, and I also have a website, Lozano4Puna.com. Thank you.
Okay, we we have one more candidate to introduce you to tonight, and his name is Ka'ena An,
Pua'ena.
Pua'ena An, and he's running for OHA at large. Please come up.
Aloha oko, my name is Pua'ena. I am running for, as she said, OHA at large, so I may not end up living here much longer. But I am the vote of no confidence. All of you get to vote in elections that affect Hawaiians, even though it doesn't affect you. So please, vote carefully. You got a lot of vultures and a lot of hawks circling around. The OHA elections are going to be very, very interesting. Some of you folks may recognize me from some of the very same places you see Carrie. Or the Merry Monarch Parade, the guy with the bucket and the picker who picked up every single piece of rubbish that all those other guys threw at the people of Hilo from the Kamehameha statue all the way back. That guy. HPD knows me as the guy who called in his own DUI and put himself in jail. Yeah, that's right. Why? And this whole race is the reason for it. I'm going after someone very specific. It's an at-large race, so we'll see where the cards fall. But I'm coming after John Waihea IV, Little Squid. This is the guy. Now, when I got myself into court after all this, I said specifically that people like him are the reason I called it in myself. Back in 2011, I was elected to the House of Nobles in the lawful Hawaiian government. You guys all know Uncle Sam, Uncle Robert. It was actually Robert Keli'iho'omalu Jr. who actually conceded his seat to me. So if Robert Keli'iho'omalu Jr. has confidence in my ability to do the job for my people, and it doesn't matter what government is in, because hey man, you guys are the Bob Dylan generation. Here comes the old boss, same as the new boss, right? Not unless you guys are the boss, and I work for you. Well, not most of you. Well, you guys know what I mean. Thank you very much. You guys can find me on Facebook right now. It's Pua'ena Kuahu'ula, you know, like the chief Keua Kuahu'ula. That's just kind of a thing I was playing around with. But you can also reach me by email. I don't have my nomination papers right now, or else I'd be hitting you guys up for signatures. But if anybody's interested, on ahn.noble.lhg.hk@gmail.com. Mahalo.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen,
I'm
if
candidate.
you are...
I'm a candidate also.
Oh,
yeah.
Daniel
Daniel Cunningham.
Dan Cunningham.
District 5, your name?
Daniel
Daniel, last name, please.
Cunningham.
Daniel Cunningham.
Thank you.
2 minutes, please.
Thank
Your
you.
time. District 5.
Thank you. Thank you. As my t-shirt may read, I'm sure everybody's heard of Tesla and the need for self-autonomy and self-sufficiency. I'm a chiropractor who tried to open a hospital and they took my license for using hypodermic needles. IV vitamin C is 10 times as potent as oral. The chiropractor sold out and nobody would come to my defense. So I founded freeenergyparty.net. I ran for governor 3 times, mayor 3 times in the state of Hawaii. And I'm presently running for county council, and I wrote an ordinance to build a floating city in the ocean and create the highest standard of living imaginable for everybody that cleans Fukushima. Nuclear sewage is more precious than gold by weight if it could be assumed and used as a fissile. It will solve all our socioeconomic problems. In the hands of an informed people, nuclear is a green technology that will set us free. Thorium is a very interesting element that is nuclear, and there's some recent article in the American Free Press newspaper, which my t-shirt also advertised. I recommend people check it out. I'm very much for the people and very much hands-on and very much appreciate grassroots support. Thank you.
U.S. County Council District 5?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, before we begin tonight, I wanted to point out that on the back counter there, we have a lot of brochures and reports for you to review. And 2 of the most recent documents that you'll find on the table is this booklet here, which is put out by the Pesticide Action Network. There's a lot of really good information in here, and it's a really difficult read for me personally because of the overwhelming evidence that's in here. It's something that I really have to take my time and read through. It makes me breathe heavy when I hear the information that's in here. And the other piece of information that we have to share with you is a list of toxics that are in pesticides, the different chemicals that are being used right now. This is on the table in the back. It's titled Toxics in Paradise. And I think that you will be a little overwhelmed by the information that you find here. Both of these documents are relevant to the talk tonight, so I hope you do pick one up if you don't already have one. Okay, without any further ado, I'd like to welcome you to Dr. Lorrin Pang, who is a resident of Maui. And Dr. Lorrin Pang, I just want to point out, has been selected best doctor, America's best doctor, 3 years in a row now.
Wow.
Please give your time and your attention to Dr. Lorrin Pang.
I have to speak from this position because I'm going to use the overhead and use the mouse. So normally I don't go around. I just want to correct that statement about America's best doctors list. That goes to 3% of the doctors. I did get it 3 years consecutively, and I'm not going to say cause and effect, but I was defamed by the University of Hawaii. I sued them and we settled, and after that defamation suit, which was never cleared, I was never selected again. But that's okay. I have something now that trumps even that. Let me give you a little bit about my background in case you didn't meet me when we talked about the mutations of GMOs. I'm born and raised in Honolulu. My mother's from Paia. My mother's from Paia. And my father's side is from Honolulu. I went to Princeton University. I have a degree with honors in chemistry. And then I went to medical school at Tulane. And I went back for the Katrina effort because Tulane is in New Orleans. I also have a master's in public health. I worked for 25 years with the Walter Reed Institute of Research and the World Health Organization. Our job was to test drugs and vaccines and diagnostics as they come through the pipeline in the clinical stages. Clinical means humans. So they give it to us to test for efficacy, if it works, and toxicity. Now, we know when it comes to you, because you're about to design the clinical trial of anywhere from 10 to 75,000 subjects, you had better do your homework and check all the input, the lab, the animal studies, the consistency of product before it comes to this trial. Nonetheless, after it passed through our trials and we said, I think it's okay, watch out for these side effects, there was post-marketing studies. And we had to be called quite a few times to Geneva to argue with the drug companies, yes, it does cause this, or no, it doesn't. Why does it cause it only in Caucasians and not the Thais or not the Africans? Why is this a racial thing, et cetera, et cetera. Then I retired in the year 2000. I came back to Hawaii. My parents were getting old and I joined the Department of Health. But since then, I still consult for the World Health Organization. And last year, I've been a professor of medicine at the University of University of Hawaii, the National Universities in Thailand, McGill in Canada, and the 3 federal universities in Brazil. I'm a professor of medicine there. I speak Portuguese. But last year, I was appointed to the U.S. Congress to review research submissions. Now, I didn't know that. I didn't think it was such a big deal. They said, check the list of who's been selected. I mean, these guys are from Sloan Kettering. These guys are from Yale and Columbia. So I don't have a problem being defamed and not being no longer listed at I keep company with a different group now. So let's get right down to it. I talked before, about a month ago, about GMOs, the mutations per se, the mutations themselves. But lately, we have found that these kinds of crops require a ton of pesticides. Now, I thought the purpose of the GMOs was to use less chemicals. Well, now it's mixed. Some of you might have heard Tyrone Hayes or Jeffrey Smith. Some of them will tell you, well, the reason they do that is to sell more chemicals. They're chemical companies. That's intention. I try not to read intention. I just say, well, you guys seem to use a whole lot more for whatever reason. Scientifically, you kind of have to use more chemicals. The reason is when you put a mutation in a plant or a human, and that mutation is always on, it's not supposed to be on all the time. 95% of our genes are silent at any one time, and they're turned on when you need them. It's orchestrated, it's got epigenetics. But the guys who put the mutations in the plants or animals can't quite figure out that subtle orchestration, so it's on. When you're on all the time, that's a serious waste of energy and effort. And so you become very susceptible to all the easy pathogens, all the things you're going to call opportunistic. They're going to overtake you. Things that you could normally handle, you can't. So, you want to grow GMOs? At the state of the art now, you got to sterilize the field. You got to protect it against all the viruses, all the pests, all the insects, all that stuff, because your plant is intrinsically weak. Now, maybe someday they'll fix it, but we ain't in that day yet. Okay? So, we got massive amounts of pesticides, and today's talk is about pesticides. I just want to go kind of slowly and talk about a few general principles so that we can all, oh, sorry, I hit the wrong, wait, oh, sorry, that's not mine, that's yours. I just want to talk about some general principles so we're all on the same sheet of music. Okay. Now, let me get the slideshow started here. Slideshow.
Bring the lights out front.
Okay.
Turn it off, 'cause there's so much fun.
Okay, if you could, yeah, okay, so.
Perfect.
Here it is.
Yeah, that's
I'm
perfect.
talking about chemicals as they're used as pesticides. But I'm going to contrast it to chemicals as they're used as drugs. Because basically I'm a pharmaceutical kind of guy. Okay, hang on, let me get this done. All right. Chemicals that affect the organism or the cell. These are called pharmacology. Well, are there chemicals that don't affect organisms? Yeah. We got a whole bunch of them. See that periodic table? Those are called the inerts. Classic inert, glass. I could grind up glass into minuscule particles, swallow it, and for all intents and purposes, it doesn't mix with you or your chemicals or your cells. So there's a whole bunch of inert stuff, but now we're just talking about the stuff that's not inert. They're called pharmacologically active. They might be good for you, say vitamins. They might be bad for you, or they might be both, good and bad. But they do have some action. And let's talk about those, drugs and pesticides, right? You can kind of think about, how did I get this chemical? Well, it might be in your food, might be in your water. I guess you can see that, oh good. It might be in the air, the dust you breathe. It might be the residue, the chemical left on food. Whoa. In fact, that's a major caution now. ABC News, Dr. Richard Besser, former head of the CDC, he tells Diane Sawyer, hey Diane, the main issue we're facing today is pesticide chemicals left on the food that we can't seem to remove. You can't seem to wash off. They're in the food. And Diane Sawyer goes, whoa, what should we do? Richard Besser says, buy organic and avoid the dirty dozen, the ones with the most, and try to target the clean 15. Dirty dozen, clean 15, the ones with the least. But anyway, it can come from many sources, even your water. And then the medical guys say, okay, that's the agent, how it got there. But how does it actually get in? Well, you can imagine the dust is breathed, the water is oral, the food is oral, and then it can come through your skin, etc., etc. Just as it can come to you, your body, you should kind of look on the cellular level. So this I'm going to call the cell. I'm going to talk about the same kind of things that happen in your body as happens in your cell. In general, if you ate a chemical, it might or may not be absorbed into your bloodstream through your gut, or maybe it isn't, and it just passes through in your feces or urine. If it's absorbed into your blood system, well, how do you get rid of it? Generally, the liver will do some biochemical things to it. It becomes water soluble, and hopefully you pee it out. There are some things that not peed out for decades. Some things are peed out so quickly, you got to take another dose every 6 hours, like some antibiotics. So, but that's a general idea. So let's talk about the cell. Here's the cell, same cell. I kind of drew these pictures. Here's the chemicals, be they drugs or pesticides, anything pharmacologically active. It's got to come into the cell, and there's usually a gatekeeper That gate can be physical, it can be chemical, it's got to kind of fit the key and the matching. It can be selective, it lets maybe sodium through, but not potassium. And if your chemical looks kind of like sodium, it comes through, acid, base, etc. You got to come through the gate. Once it comes in, there's a carrier, or probably a carrier, that a company binds to this thing and brings it to the target. There's a target for benefit, and there's probably targets for toxicity, or a couple of targets for toxicity, or maybe 10. And you hope that you can have more benefit. Don't get too high because you're going to start triggering toxicity. Meanwhile, there's this thing called a pump, the glycoprotein pump. This was our area of research. And when these chemicals come in with the carriers, it would just be pumped right out. Great. Hey, how do we get that pump? I mean, it's an important thing. Things that shouldn't be there are just pumped out. We really don't know, but I can tell you the malaria parasite, my area is malaria, it has a pump, the same pump as our human liver cells. Well, does that mean that my ancestors had sex with a parasite's ancestors? Probably not. Probably a virus that infects different organisms. The malaria parasite, the parasite is susceptible to viruses, and then it affected me, and it pirates, trades pieces of the DNA that coded for the pump. When our ancestors got that pump gene, the gene that makes the pump, that was a good thing. We put it in the liver, and we can detoxify many things. So we kept it, and it's passed on through my genes to my children. Many, many things came in through viruses that were not good, and those lines of humans died out. Okay, so not just humans have the pump, and bloody things have the pump. It's such a useful, wonderful thing. If it's not pumped out, it's chemically mixed or degraded, and the metabolites are pumped out. So you're not pumping the chemical, but the thing is modified chemically and pumped out. Okay, this cell I drew is specific to what kind of cell. I talked about it in general terms. This cell could be a kidney cell that does certain things, that has different mechanisms, but generally the same kind. It could also be the germ cell. Oh my. Germ cell, babies, germ cells, cancer. So you mean to tell me that you got this chemical that seems to be okay for the kidney cells and the heart cells, but when exposed to the germ cells, egg, sperm, or the germ cells that cause cancer, it does things that we don't see it do in the kidney cells? Exactly. Okay, and these are called the windows. These cells where you're susceptible, bone marrow, very susceptible to certain drugs. So the toxicity and efficacy of certain drugs is specific to that cell, to those sets of cells. Okay, now, here we go. I just want to make sure. And I made another slide just to say, effects are cell type specific. Could be kidney, could be liver, could be bone marrow, or could be germ. You heard Tyrone Hayes if you heard Tyrone Hayes, he talks about congenital malformations, birth defects. That's because, and this is a picture, I think from his talk. He says that in utero, the babies he talked about one chemical, atrazine, but he said, he quoted a publication that the babies in utero are affected by 300 chemicals, the majority of them pesticides. So that window, the germ cells, is very susceptible, or it behaves differently to different chemicals. So if you told me this chemical is safe on adults, I'm going to say, and how about children? And how about pregnancy, birth defects? How about cancer? So I put up these children because Tyrone Hayes was talking about birth defects. Here's one, breast cancer. When in breast cancer, there are generally two classes, estrogen sensitive, estrogen non-sensitive. Many chemicals, now including pesticides, but plastics too, maybe some drugs, they mimic estrogen. As far as the breast cancer is concerned, that thing looks like estrogen and it stimulates them. If you heard Tyrone Hayes, he talked about the estrogen and the atrazine kind of seems to stimulate estrogen, which stimulates the cancer cell. So these are the windows of susceptibility. Very important, because when people assure you that these drugs are safe, you have to say, and how are those windows? Did you test them? Okay, hang on, it gets even a little more tricky. So, not just, now you don't have to read the fine print, not just Richard Besser, but way before, in the year, I think this is 2009, there's a call by the American Academy of Pediatrics for greater protection from toxic exposures. Okay, all chemicals, right? But especially pesticides. And they warn you that because babies, and not just in utero, but growing babies, are so susceptible to these chemicals. Hey, susceptible to chemicals. Pang, that's you, your drugs. That's right. When we use drugs, before we use drugs, antibiotics, whatever, we're very cautious about using it in young children, and certainly cautious in pregnant women. If we plan to use it in pregnant women, we'll test it in pregnant women and young children. But generally, we like to leave young children alone unless you have to do a cancer chemotherapy, and then we'll test it in them. Now, what about the old pesticides? Well, you'll see soon, we really don't test the pesticides in humans at all, let alone pregnant women or babies, but yet we're exposed. Yeah, but we didn't test it in them. You'll see why. All right. Let's talk about how we test these chemicals. It could be drugs, it could be pesticides, just chemicals, now that you know a little bit about it. The first thing is called GMP. This is the World Health Organization, what I taught the students. This is why I was recruited to teach them and then watch them do their projects. It stands for, I lost my mouse, Good Manufacturing Practice. Sounds almost like GMOs, but believe me, GMPs was around decades before GMOs. And that just means you make your product consistently. You have no business testing if you can't make it consistently, because you're going to get different results if you can't make it consistently. Now, you hear a lot of this concern now with diet supplements. Gee, I should have mentioned my name. But some got pulled off the shelf because some are mixtures of 3 twigs and 2 leaves. Well, you think 3 twigs and 2 leaves are consistent? Not really. I have nothing against herbal compounds, but we use them to extract the chemicals. And we knew that chemical, not the twig or leaf. And when we contracted nations to please grow this plant, we need the antimalarial drug. Vietnam grew it, Bulgaria grew it, and we found that Vietnam, same old plant, was 7-fold as potent as Bulgaria. So a leaf is not consistent. It depends on where it grew. Certainly not consistent in your target drug, and probably not consistent in your toxicity. But if you can single it down to a chemical, hey, what chemical is that? Glyphosate, the active component of Roundup. Generally, if it looks like that, exactly like that, then it's consistent. Okay, we can at least say that. Well, there's some subtle stuff. The chemical guys got burned. Because sometimes I can give you the same structure, and it's different. How is that? It's called handedness, racemic. Your left hand is chemically kind of like your right hand, but one is right hand and one is left hand. And some chemical reactions are right-handed side and left-handed. So we got burned a little bit, but we learned our lesson. Here is something that is going to be very hard to argue your product's consistent. Now, I promised I wouldn't talk too much about mutations. GMOs are mutations. But I got like 15%. He said I could talk about it. This is the genome, all the gene sequence of the yeast. I think it's yeast. There's 12.5 million base pairs. Here's a base pair. That base pair looks pretty chemical. Yep. Good. Then it's just 12.5 million of those. Well, wait a minute. You see the conformation is three-dimensional, twisted and turns? So there's something special about the genome, how it twists. It's not just a sequence. Now that is not consistent. If you go and throw your mutations into this mess, hey, 12.5 million, I just threw in 200. What's your problem? You threw in 200 things that sometimes are crucial. I call them the hinge points. What does that mean? Well, sometimes a gene will make a protein, and generally we used to say one gene, one protein. That was a dogma. Now you get an F. If you put that down, ask any biology student. In general, one gene makes 3 proteins. Well, I thought it was just reading in the sequence. Yeah, sometimes it reads cross because of conformational, and then it's called the shifting reading frame. So this folding and twisting and three-dimensional is important because sometimes you read cross. Depends on the orchestration. So if there's some signal, it's time to make antibodies against that germ, it will twist and read this way to make that one. Okay? So certainly, small things, histones, small things, methylation, little bits of things can affect the twist and turn immensely, and that ain't consistent. Okay, but I'm talking about drugs now, and this is. Okay. Next we have GLP, good laboratory practice. You will see all these things in the lab, the biochemistry markers, the cellular cultures, even the animals. Animals belong in the lab. Then you have GMP. GMP. Oh, sorry, it's GCP. That's a typo. You do this in order. You make your product, you take it to the lab, then you come to clinical. Clinical means humans. This is our area. They actually have a formal system. Phase 1, you got a product. We ramp it up on testing the limit of toxicity. Wait a minute. I thought we were just trying to cure malaria. I will test it without malaria just to know the toxic limit, phase 1. Then we do phase 2. That's where we ramp it up to test for cure. Phase 2, you will never cross the phase 1 dose that you did. I mean, because then you're in trouble. Then we pick the best one for cure and minimal toxicity from phase 1 and 2. And we do the big phase 3. Hey, here, phase toxicity and efficacy, phase 3. That's just monster studies for statistical certainty. You don't have these little random things. These were called the pivotal studies. When you got a phase 3 that shows it's good, all the guys before, he said, well, in my animals, hey, we're beyond that. We're in humans. Humans are humans. Well, in my little, no. These are pivotal. And even after the pivotal phase 3, that was our area, phase 3, we moved, unfortunately, to phase 4. Phase 4 is post-marketing, no matter what you showed in phase 3. This is what we're seeing now. It's like, I better check this out. So it's already marketed, guys getting sick. The product doesn't work. You, the phase 3 guys, go out there, interviewing them all, and say, is there something special about you that this thing makes you sick? And we got in all kinds of fights. There was this drug that seemed to work real good in phase 3 for malaria. We tested it in ties. I tested it. Didn't it work good and no side effects. As soon as Caucasians took it, there was like psychosis. And the CDC hit the roof. Vivid dreams, suicidal thoughts. And then, we're not supposed to talk about race, but you can't deny this. When one group is all, the Caucasians didn't seem to handle it. Furthermore, they had severe allergies we didn't see in ties. Then there were products, we saw funny side effects in Africans and not in anyone else, but whatever. Sometimes it's not even race, it's their diet, like Lipitor. That seemed to work pretty good for cholesterol, but some people had weird levels. What was their problem? Grapefruit juice, not lemon juice, not lime juice, grapefruit juice. And so you see the phase 4 studies, post-marketing, really takes into account you, how you live, who you are. If you're going to drink grapefruit juice every day, gee, I guess we should have tested it in the phase 3. Well, I didn't know that. If you're going to overload your body with chemicals from plastics or my drugs and get pesticides, well, I guess now you got a superimposition of drugs on drugs, chemicals on chemicals. So the phase 4 studies are very important. 50% of the drugs, I'm not talking about pesticides, of the drugs we release, we see serious side effects after marketing. 50%. Now, let's go over this real carefully. It's not 50% of the side effects we see post-market, 50% of the drugs release, we see side effects. 10% of those 50% have to be recalled. The others are relabeled. Don't drink grapefruit juice with the Lipitor. Don't take gajillion drugs if you're going to take this drug. That's why when you see the ads on TV, check with your doctor, but don't take this and this and this and this with this drug, etc. That's liability. All right, let's move along. Here's the chemicals. I'm back in general chemicals. Here's the pesticides. Here's the drugs for human consumption. Generally, drugs are for human consumption. You must do human studies if you're going to bring it forth to market. Okay, that makes sense. You must study who you plan to give it to. If it's going to be long-term, I want a long-term study. If it's going to be pregnant women, I want to study pregnant women. Generally, we take it to healthy males first. If they got a problem, don't give it to pregnant women. But if it passes the healthy males, slowly give it to the pregnant women or young children. If you're going to test it in AIDS patients, that's special, that's what we did. I want to see the study in AIDS. You cannot extrapolate. That's drugs. You intend for people to take it. Here are pesticides. Pesticides are never intended for humans, so it's prohibited. Hey, here human studies are obligatory, and here it's prohibited. Okay, well then how in the world do we get human data if I can't test the pesticides in humans? Sometimes we get a little bit roundabout. The guys who make it occupational risk, maybe they got sick and we can study them. Yeah, maybe not. That's a little iffy. And the way we really study this is phase 4. After it's marketed, anybody sick? Well, can't you test it before you brought it out? No, it's prohibited. That's the difference, no human studies. Okay, if that's what you want. Here's the drug study, I repeat, before we release the drug. GCP, good manufacturing product, make the drug consistently. No contamination, no weird side chains. Bring it to the animal studies or the cell studies. Then come to the human, the trials. Then we post-market it in that sequence. This is the pivotal study. Some people speak against the pivotal study. Why? I thought they're so important. They are, but we got burned so many times in the post-marketing stuff. We kind of don't like to say, well, mine was pivotal. Well, the post-marketing didn't show that. Here is the pesticide studies before we release it. Okay? Like a single compound, like atrazine, that Dr. Hayes talks about. We take it to the lab. Yep. We test it against cells, or we test it against lab animals. Oh, no human trials, but time for post-marketing. Oh, how do we deal with a precautionary principle when there's incomplete data, no human trials? Well, you could pray that humans will never be exposed, and then we don't really worry about the precautionary principle, right? Okay. You were never supposed to get high levels. You were never supposed to have constant exposure of pesticides. It was never supposed to be all over the place in your water. Soon you'll see how much it is. And it was never going to affect the windows of susceptibility, pregnancy and all. So we didn't need the human trials. And finally, it was not supposed to be mixed. But we didn't do any human trials because humans were not supposed to be exposed. But, when humans are exposed post-marketing, don't we have to do the human stuff now? Yeah. Well, shouldn't we have a moratorium while we do the human stuff? Now that's the key issue. Like, no, we don't need a moratorium. Yes, we do. The one I showed you before, remember, was pesticides for a single compound before the release. Okay, that's what we do. Here's the pesticides after the release that we never did a study for at all. Typically, these are the mixtures. You call it EPA, when we call them to Kauai. the GMO companies have been using 80+ chemicals. In medicine, guarantee you, 2 chemicals or drugs are considered a new drug to prove it otherwise. And by new drug, I don't mean a new chemical. They affect the body differently. Kind of like, I have to use this example on Maui. Kind of like my mother is drug A, I'm drug B. Now, we have to cook dinner. My mother, I can look in the refrigerator and I can't figure out her food or how to make dinner, but I can open the door. She's old, she can't open the door. So, me alone, no dinner. Her alone, she can't open the refrigerator door, no dinner. But together, I open the door, she chooses the food, we have dinner. It's not that me and my mother are a new person, it's that the effects are very different now when you combine them. So let's get that real clear. When we asked the EPA, out of the 80 chemicals, have you tested combinations? No. They didn't really say no. They didn't answer. They said, well, each single one is below its threshold. I said, no. I'm asking about combinations because as a pharmacy guy, not pharmacy, but medical guy, when we combine 2 antimalarial drugs, great alone, I just wanted to combine them to see an added effect. He said, oh no, Dr. Pang, you got to test all again, the safety and efficacy. Good thing they told me that because there was some weird stuff. And you know why? Because I showed you the picture of the cell. One could block the pump, one could block the other thing, and it builds up to horrible, horrible compounds. Let me just, because my memory is, we won't, target toxicity, okay. Sorry, I lost one slide, but, here it is. You see, I got the same cell with the same mechanisms, and I'm going to deal with 2 compounds, A and B. Well, you can imagine if B blocks the gate or opens the gate, you get higher levels of A. You can imagine if B blocks the metabolic degradation, you get higher A. Or it blocks the pump, you get higher A. It's obvious from the cellular model, these things can do anything. That's just A and B. You remember a combination could be A, B, C, etc. Okay. So here we are. The pesticide, all of a sudden it's used, and we didn't even do a good job of the single test, okay? We didn't do it because it's a mixture, or we didn't do it because it's a cigarette. Cigarettes were never tested. We just smoked them. And if you look at the millennium, you know, who was the man of the century? It was Albert Einstein. Time magazine said that. What was the shame of the century? Cigarettes. We did not show they were toxic until 1950, after so many people had died, so much cigarettes have been marketed. Now you have this chemical mixture. Cigarettes are 500 chemicals mixing all together when you light it, and it was never tested. You never tested one of them. So what do? When we suspect post-marketing cigarettes are showing people dying, we try to launch all these things at once. We try to make up that series. So sometimes we do studies. We say, after marketing, look, all the guys with cancer, more of them smoke than don't smoke. So if you take cancer, 90% of them smoke. You take no cancer, age match, probably 80% of them don't smoke. So we do these retrospective population studies. We can also do it on birth defects, and we can also do it looking backwards on mice. It's looking backwards. We could technically do human trials. If somebody says, I think cigarettes is causing cancer, well, how do you know? Because when I look back, all the guys with lung cancer are the smokers. Let's get some guys and make them smoke to see if it's a little bit unethical, but you can take guys who smoke and follow them like the Dickens, but that's a little unethical too, right? They're going to say, you took a bunch of guys who smoke just to watch them get cancer. You didn't warn them. You didn't make them stop smoking.
You should know by now.
That's unethical. Okay, so be careful. Sometimes we can't do this classical one, but we surely can do the animal studies. We can put nicotine on the animals and watch them get transdermal cancers. We can make the rat smoke. And then we do the lab studies we identify the chemicals of the cigarette, nicotine or tar. Tar causes lung cancer, nicotine causes cardiovascular addiction. So we piece together backwards. Well, why am I telling you this? Because the pesticide combinations were never tested, and they're out amongst us. I'll show you soon. And this is what we're trying to do, piece together all this stuff backwards, okay? Now, here's the mixtures. I kind of jumped ahead. But you take the same model, you can just say A is going to block the gate, so B has no effect. Or A is going to make the gate more permeable, so you're going to have more B. Generally, you can say one could potentiate the other, or you can have a novel effect. What do you mean novel effect? Here, look. A is metabolized, and the degradation product, A prime, is excreted by the cell. But if B blocks the excretion of A prime, then you will see effects of A prime, which you never saw before. Or if A blocks the target for toxicity, well, that's saturated. So A says, well, what's next? That target, a new target of toxicity. We see this all the time. Don't fuss around or wing it when you got mixtures. I just use A and B, but you know there's could be a lot of different mixtures. Okay. So, am I just making this up? I had to give a testimony before the Hawaii Senate Health, and these were my prime examples. You don't have to read this. I'll leave this for you guys. You can pull it off and read it yourself. This is a publication by National Institutes of Environmental Health and the Cancer Institute. These are big guys. And they're telling us that regardless of how you follow the label on spraying, we are exposed to pesticide exposure chronically, not single block, but chronically. And they said, well, how do you know that? Because the cancer rates are higher and the neurotoxicity, including autism, are higher. So these guys do the survey, you know that survey I showed you, these guys did this thing over here, and they're telling us we're getting a lot of exposures. Now, I don't know if it's drift, I don't know if it's food, I don't know if it's water. Here's another paper, key paper, in toxicology, great publication. These are powerful people, and they essentially told you everything I showed you with a cell. That all these different ways you can make things better, worse, or the same by adding things together. All right? The EPA, when we talked about this, said we really don't test combinations, okay? But each one is below its threshold, sometimes 1,000-fold below the threshold that triggers, but in general 300. So I pulled this publication. All you have to do is look at this one. And this is potentiation of different activity compounds. You see, compared to baseline, when you add something, you added a different chemical. This one goes up 3,000-fold. I can potentiate, in fact, that's just one, several thousand-fold. Okay, so if you say my margin of error was 300, that doesn't do too much for my confidence. Here is a whole bunch of examples. I'll give this on your website, you can look it up. All the different combinations that potentiate and make things worse. Alcohol and sedatives. Ooh. Nicotine and ammonia. That's cool. Nicotine is what addicts you to cigarettes. But we give the guy a nicotine patch to withdraw. Hey, I thought nicotine addicts you. It's the pulse. That spike of nicotine, it's called impact. Heroin guys call it the rush. It's that pulse that addicts you. So the cigarette company tried to pulse the spike. And first, they actually did GMO tobacco to increase the nicotine load, but in those days it was illegal to do it in the US in the 70s. So they went to Brazil, and they made a tobacco plant that produced really nothing but nicotine. That would really addict you. But nobody could smoke it. They said it tastes like old socks. I don't know, I don't taste old socks. But nobody would begin to smoke it. But they wanted a pulse. And they found they could do it by adding ammonia. It's called freebasing.
Yeah.
In order to cross your lung, it's got to be base. So you add a little ammonia and it rushes. You see the potentiating effect, the addictive effect. Here's Lipitor and grapefruit juice. Here's a gajillion other drug-drugs interactions. So obviously, drugs do interact. But pesticides, I was a little bit criticized by the ag people because they use so many, but not in combination. Well, what do you think combination should mean? Well, if you mix them together, that's a combination, correct? If they are not mixed together but overlap in the environment, sometimes they last months, years, to me that's a combination. If they are not in the environment but overlap in your body, some of these things take a long time to clear, that's a combination. And here's the most important one of all. If the two chemicals never overlap, they never see each other, not in the spray, not in the environment, not in your body, but the damage it leaves behind to your body or the environment, like a reef, the damage is not cleared, resolved, before the other chemical comes. Like Kauai, it rained, and the river washed into the ocean, there were 50,000 dead sea urchins, and people say, well, that affected the reef. Yeah, besides affecting the sea urchins, it affected the reef. If it takes 10 years for the sea urchins to come back, and in the meantime, you put another chemical that killed the algae, that's an overlap, that's a combination to me. And I think most people will agree. Okay, so once again, I'm talking about combinations, okay? This is a principle of combinations. So how many combinations could there be? Well, I did the math for you. With 4 chemicals, there's 15 possible combinations. You know, A, B, A, C, A, D, but there's A, B, C, there's A, D, C, whatever. There's 15 combinations. And I think the road crews that spray Roundup and stuff on your roadside use about 4. With 15 chemicals, say pineapple and sugarcane, non-GMO, there are 30,000 combinations. Ooh. With 30 chemicals, there's 10 billion combinations. With 45 chemicals, this is part of the dirty dozen. Oh, there's 10 trillion combinations. And here's GMO. We subpoenaed the list of chemicals. Now, I'm not talking about just pesticides. I'm talking about anything that's pharmacologically active. Some things are surfactants or detergents. They don't kill the plant, they allow the chemicals to enter. That's a combination. There are a trillion times a trillion combinations. Whoa. These combinations can occur from drift, food residue, or water contamination. Whoa, trillion. That's so much I don't know where to begin.
What's the other dirty dozen ones?
Well, there's 12. Boy, this is going to be taxing. I think celery was one.
I know.
But if I say any more, I'm going to mix the clean 15 with the dirty dozen. But it's on, just type dirty dozen.
Just
Then
type in dirty dozen.
clean 15, yeah, I don't know. Well, start with the clean 15. It's called clean 15. Now, look, nobody is going to test a trillion different combinations. Okay? And so the ag guys, at least on Maui, were kind of making fun of me. Oh, but just because you can't test it, does that mean the risk isn't there? The risk is absolutely there. This is like winning the lottery in reverse. Your chance of having less than 1,000 is so remote, I'd rather bet on winning the lottery. Now, don't forget, not everything was combining, although you use 80. I've seen the records. Let's say not 80 combined, let's just say 45 combined. It's 10 trillion. Okay. Sometimes when you combine them, they don't affect each other, or they block each other. That's good. And sometimes they potentiate them. So let's say a third, there's no effect, a third block, a third potentiate. Okay, now we're dealing with 10 trillion, a third. Guys, either way, the risk is phenomenal. So the industry had no answer, except we just can't test this many, okay? Well, sure you can. Sure you can. Oh, this is, why does the industry have to use so many chemicals? I told you. I think it's because scientifically they have to sterilize the ground. Tyrone Hayes will tell you it's because they want to sell chemicals. Well, That's like, I'm trying to read intention, I'm trying to read, whatever it is, maybe they don't want to use, but they have to. Okay, so if we can't test so many compounds, what do we do? Here, you test the entire mixture. Cigarette, 500 compounds, a gajillion combinations. What did we test, a gajillion combinations? No, we test the cigarette. Test the whole mixture. Is that what I'm asking? That's exactly what I'm asking. You use 80 compounds, let's test that big soup. Who should we test it on? Animals, I guess, yeah. Cell cultures, yeah. Should we test it on humans? Because the humans are being exposed anyway. That's a little unethical, but what the heck?
They're already exposed.
Some days they don't get 80, they get 45. Well, let's go test the 45. You need to test the mixtures if we're going to be exposed. And the previous publications, I showed you, we are being exposed. There is a serious problem with combinations. I'm going to leave the combinations and talk about a new principle. This one's very disturbing. It has to do with chemicals, but not combinations. I'm finished talking about combinations. There's a new topic of pesticides causing sublethal dosing. Oh. Side means kill, cyto. Kill the pest. It kills. But when you don't kill it, and you kind of wound it, and it survives, what happens? These are really cool science going on. This is our area of work. Every time we treat malaria, people somehow didn't take the full dose, or they shared it with a brother who had fever, or they saved it for next time, and they took a sublethal dose. The parasites or germs or plants or humans that do survive, they are quite mutagenic. You got so many mutations, and it seems to stimulate mutations. Here's the publications. And those mutations, the good ones, will survive, and the bad ones will die off. In general, mutations are more unfit than the wild strain. Wild strain always dominates mutations. I think that's true. But yet you're telling me, Dr. Pang, when we get a sublethal dose of whatever you spray, like this one, it killed it because he's spraying there. But you see there, he didn't spray there. And if it rained, it got a sublethal dose. Whatever was out there, the weeds, it got sublethal dose. And when it did survive, overcame the illness, it came back with so many mutations. But Dr. Pang, mutations are weaker. Here we go. I did this. When you tell me somebody is weaker or somebody's stronger, or a population is weaker or stronger, I'm going to say, what are we talking about? The mean or the variation? So let's just say this is the weight of boars, 10th grade boars. Here's the variation of boars. Sorry, this is the frequency, and this is the trait, the weight of boys. Boys, on the average, weigh more than girls. Okay, the average. But if you went and did something to the girls that stimulated a whole bunch of mutations, the girls would now look like this, kind of like here. Still, the boys' average weight is, or you can even make the girls' average weight here, same. But the variation puts some in this one. And if there was a contest to choose the heaviest person, this subset of girls, small as it is, will eventually dominate. The winner takes all. This is not an averaging thing. Now, is it any wonder why when we use antibiotics, sublethal, those there we get antibiotic resistance in 12 years? Is it any wonder why your pesticides kind of went not full dose over there, it rained, you get super weeds, because these things are general mutagens. Let's get this real clear. Because this guy, Kohansky, that guy, brilliant, Boston University. If I use a drug or a pesticide in a sublethal dose, you're telling me you're stimulating mutations to overcome that drug. Yes, that ain't the only thing I'm telling you about. You're stimulating all kinds of mutations. Some will make it against her drug. What the heck? She didn't abuse that drug. You abused yours, but your subdose made resistance to her drug as well. So here's something absolutely cool. Neat thing to remember. We're spraying mosquitoes with DDT. This is before they kind of banned DDT. Well, it's still, you still can use it for mosquitoes. And some mosquitoes got a sublethal dose. Yeah, you just couldn't hit them, they were on the fringe. And we thought, oh my, now we're gonna get mosquitoes resistant to DDT. Resistant to DDT. Well, we got resistant mosquitoes. But was it really what I thought? So we go out there now, 12 years later, oh, don't use DDT, the mosquitoes are resistant. And I said, they're really resistant? They said, well, actually, if you catch a mosquito and you put him on the surface with DDT and you put a cup, he'll die. He's not really resistant to the DDT itself. He's developed what they call a behavioral resistant. Oh. Before, the mosquito bites you and it rests on the wall. It's full of blood. It wants to rest. And it touches the wall, touches DDT and dies. Now the mosquito bites you and rests outside. It's a behavioral resistance. Now I'm beginning to wonder if the behavioral, since you made all mutations, one was for behavior, and the winner took all, it was the behavioral resistance which made DDT useless, not resistance to DDT per se. But that's just kind of underlies what the general thinking is. And here's an actual publication that sublethal doses of some pesticide made weird flowers. Oh, okay. It's kind of like radiation, just blasted with mutations. In summary, this is kind of like where I end about mixing chemicals and sublethal doses. I'm going to say that the pesticide mixture is alarming. I showed you a trillion possibilities. They're not adequately addressed prior to marketing, okay? In fact, Dr. Hayes and other people will talk about just for atrazine and show we can barely test single pesticides, let alone mixtures, especially in areas of chronic exposure or windows of susceptibility. The women with breast cancer, or men with prostate cancer, or birth defects, or if we take it every day. This was a very ugly area of contention. Here is Pesticide Action Network. Someone made reference to them. I stopped at 50%. How often is it found in our water? These are starting the list of pesticides. There's a whole bunch more below 50%. It's in our water, just in the water. But of course it's in the air and in our food now. But these things are everywhere, potentially terrific combinations in our water. Okay? So here's Dr. Hayes. He said that we're worried because of the birth defects. Okay, I get it, the window. And he said that his levels that stimulated thing in frogs is 30 times lower than what the EPA is allowing. Heck, I usually speak after Dr. Hayes. I can say, well, if it's not 30 times higher or lower, just look at the combinations. You have no idea what the potentiation does. Remember Hayes, he showed that the baby, I said this before, the baby is exposed to 300 chemicals? Whoa, that's some combination. So we have looked in Hawaii for atrazine in our drinking water, and it's in about 30%, third of our wells. So in 1990. But they will immediately tell you it's below the EPA, it's below the EPA threshold. Doesn't mean much, because some of our wells have 4 or 5 chemicals. Dr. Hayes is knocking on the door about the congenital, the windows of susceptibility. I am underwhelmed for the 3rd time with the EPA. I've dealt with them before. There's many articles now about the EPA that they have good scientists, but the administrators won't let them speak. So this is Pesticide Action Network. I'm just talking about atrazine, a single one, showing that it wasn't fully tested. And you know, they talk about endocrine disruptor, reproductive effects, cancers, and they said timing is everything, that window. Then they talk about synergistic effects with atrazine and other pesticides. Okay, so this is Pesticide Action Network. Now, switch chemicals, something common too, but not tested. Glyphosate, this is the active compound of Roundup. There is a study by Moms Across America in about 150 women who were trying to be organic. They are not farmers who spray. 50%, oh, this is it's 30%. This is really a typo. 30% of the women's urine in their study, 30% had atrazine. With a more sensitive test in Europe, 70% of the Europeans, of the women. Yeah. Why did I put 50%? Because at the same time, 50% of their water had atrazine, no, sorry, glyphosate. But we really think glyphosate is from residue on the food. They use Roundup Ready to spray the food. So I had to talk about glyphosate to our state senate, and in 2014, I actually put out a whole bunch of studies and summarized them for you. This is a study by Dr. Seralini, much criticized. He showed tumors with glyphosate. He used a tumor model in rats, highly criticized, but lately he's been vindicated, exonerated by Georgetown Medical School. They said he wasn't trying to show all those studies, he's just trying to contribute to the animal section. Time and time again, your industry say, wait, your little animal study, it didn't show everything. Yeah, we're just trying to do the animal study, okay? Because we didn't do the whole thing, okay? So we're not trying to do everything at once. Then Dr. Seralini again. Oh, he published again. It's cool. He took cells in the laboratory, germ cells, and he said glyphosate alone wasn't too bad, wasn't bad. And then there was something called POEA, a surfactant, which alone is okay. Surfactant is like a detergent that allows glyphosate to penetrate. So either one alone wasn't too bad, but when combined, he saw cell necrosis and early cell death. Okay, that's a combination. Now the industry has said that I'm talking about trillion combinations in theory because I can't really name a real one. Well, here's one, POEA, the surfactant, plus glyphosate. And there's many others, if you bother to test them. Okay, so he's talking about combinations and cell death in germ cells. Right, here's another one. This is Carrasco from Argentina. This is cool. He recently passed away, I think natural causes, and there was a big, this guy really stood up and he spoke his mind. Dr. Carrasco from Argentina, he did this interesting study in embryos of chickens and frogs. And he said when glyphosate, not a combination, the active component Roundup, is exposed early on, it causes craniofacial defects, the neural crest formation. And in these frogs and chickens, he saw neural crest, anencephaly, no brain, and facial defects. The ones that were born, not the ones that got aborted. And he said this is important because for the last several years, Argentina has been reporting a rise in this same thing in humans in the areas that use glyphosate, the soybean or GM soy. Okay. He showed the animal model. You remember we're piecing together things backwards. Look at the population, see the rise, fivefold rise in facial cranial defects in humans. He does an animal model. Washington State, Oregon State, reporting the same thing. They feel that their glyphosate is in their water, causing this thing. So, what does the EPA say? Well, in our studies, we didn't see this. What's your study? What did you do prior to marketing? You don't get to do a post-marketing study prior to marketing. So they pull the animal studies. I'm trying to pull the animal studies. Some of it's unpublished. But my student said, look at the EPA rules and guidelines. When you test animals, if you're going to use dogs, you test 8 dogs. If you're going to use rats or rodents, you use 40 to 60. Okay, where's my 40, 60 rodents? Let's say they're pregnant. I don't know, I didn't see the study. If you dose these animal pregnant rodents and you saw nothing, 0, the confidence interval, let's say 40, is 0 to 9. Your study is so small, you could have missed 9%. Even if you saw nothing, 0 out of 40, you could be off by 9%. Okay? What is Dr. Carrasco's report, or Washington State's report in humans? He said, we got big numbers of humans. I accept 0.2% background for these birth defects, real characteristic. And I see a 5-fold increase to 1%. So he's reporting 1%. And these guys are trying to negate it with animal studies that could miss up to 9%. The 2 data sets are compatible. These animal studies were never meant to refute bigger studies in humans, plus animals are animals, humans are humans. But even if the animal was a good model, the numbers are off, guys. You don't use this kind of thing to refute what you see in the field. And then here's another thing about glyphosate. Publication by Dr. Jayasumana from Sri Lanka. For the last 15 years, the World Health Organization had been tracking chronic kidney disease of unknown origin, dialysis, lots of death, I think it's like 15%. And these are not diabetic kidneys, they are not hypertensive kidneys. So the Sri Lankans, with an international team, said, let's look at these guys. So they looked at them, and some people said the water is hard. But the area with the hardest water didn't have this syndrome. Then they looked at glyphosate, Roundup. The area with the hardest water didn't use glyphosate, all the rest did. Why didn't they use glyphosate? Because that landmine, they don't do farming when they used to do landmine. And so that population study, that epidemiology study working backwards, they are trying to say that glyphosate plus hard water is causing this, okay? So these are some of the many projects. Then you will hear, and we got to be fair, of this study by Dr. Seneff. Dr. Seneff comes to Hawaii. She's from MIT. You might have heard about her. And this is called the population study. This is over the years, from the year 1990 to the year 2010, the use of glyphosate, and the glyphosate is in red, and the rise in autism. Now, let's be fair. This is what they call the ecological study on a population looking backwards. Post-marketing. Post-marketing. This is the industry's comment. Well, look, plenty of stuff rises during those years. Organic food. And so just as you say glyphosate might be causing autism, organic food might be causing autism. I mean, the woman published this. But this is what she said, this is her words. I think her name is Leila Katuri. This is not to say that glyphosate should not be studied, just don't say it causes. Really, I don't think Dr. Seneff is saying it causes. We're trying to recreate all those studies, including the clinical trial, and this is kind of like a smoking gun. Even she says, just not to say it shouldn't be studied, so let's study it. So how would you study that? I mean, in general, we use more glyphosate. In general, there's a bump up in autism. Some might be from diagnostics, but some might be from true rise. Well, you gotta go into the individual data, not just we all used it, we all got more. You gotta say, did you use glyphosate and how is your baby? And so that's what we're designing now. In fact, another paper came out and they started breaking out, not by glyphosate, but by pesticide use and geography. So you pick a county, say that county right there. Oh, this is autism spectrum disorder. Oh, they had a lot. Oh, did they use a lot of glyphosate? We could look. They didn't look, they just looked at geographic area. They're supposed to look at pesticides and glyphosate. But that's how you break it up individually. But all these things are trying to recreate that perfect system which we should have had. And to say, you haven't proven it, in general it takes a sequence of studies to prove something. But you haven't disproved it, and I think it's time to look. The issue for us is, while we look, are we going to have a moratorium? Or are we just going to business as usual? I think we should have a moratorium. Too much is just too much. Okay, I'll stop there. Field any questions? You can go on. Yes.
Lorrin, recently the EPA or the health department came out with these studies about pesticides in the stream.
Yes.
To try to downplay it all.
Yes.
They didn't talk about combinations at all.
No.
Do you have any comments on that?
Okay, that survey, they were told, go find atrazine. And they saw, I showed you drinking water. They're beginning to look at atrazine in surface water. And nobody kind of knows what to make with that, but they said they would look. The combinations, nobody wants to address, but that doesn't mean it's not there. You know, one of our wells in Maui, Ichipoka well, had 4 remnants of contamination. All right, some of it's sugarcane, some of pineapple, but it's in our water, even though they stopped pineapple. We got 4. One solution, not mine, was we would put so much normal water in, we would dilute them past the threshold. What's the threshold? The threshold for single compounds are not the threshold for four, until proven otherwise.
So do you think the environmental court we're talking about could help address this?
It could. It depends how much influence they, really. I've been working with drug companies a long time. I kind of, they make the drugs, I always suspect them, even if they're good people, they will always be criticized. My beef is with the regulators.
Would you be able to go to the environmental court if it were established and
Sure.
say this?
Sure. I've
Okay.
appeared in court, I'm the medical expert for the suit on Kauai.
All right, so we better get
And-
on Abercrombie.
and the other
and see if it
issue-
passes it.
Look, there's a
This
school.
next month.
How much power do you think they're
There's a
really
school
gonna
in
have?
Kauai, they kept getting sick. And when I went to investigate as a private citizen, I wrote, I kept pointing to this company, Syngenta. You know, I find out they're suing, and I'm the medical expert for this company, Pioneer. I said, holy cow, all my reports was them, I didn't know it's this. I said, relax, Dr. Pang. You gotta look at the wind modeling. It's one big soup. And I'll be damned if we enter court on one company and it's, that's our guys. First of all, the lists overlap, but it wasn't ours. That's why the regulator should step up. Look, all four of you, some of it historic from the sugar cane, but you play the hand you're dealt. If sugar cane put atrazine in your water and you're crossing some threshold or in combination, hey, it's in our water. You can't say that's the other guy, so I get to put my fair share. You can't.
Yeah.
Yes.
Most of the pesticides used, well, let's say go back to agriculture. Agriculture is highly dependent on pesticide use, and our food cost is related to agricultural production. So if, let's say, all of these chemicals are going to shorten your life, how would you propose to transfer or transform the agriculture industry, which has for years been dependent on this type of farming practice?
Mixtures.
And in Hawaii, we have a very special kind of agriculture climate because the weather never changes. So if we want to become self-sufficient in Hawaii, how do you propose that we regulate the pests?
Okay, first of all, the question is, first of all, I was very shocked that the GMO guy is using above 80, okay? Whatever less we can get back, pineapple sugar, or pineapple was pretty high, but it's a whole lot less than 80.
Pineapple, sugarcane, yeah, but even
15.
your vegetable crops,
Okay.
highly dependent on pesticides because of
That's fine. But when you
For
calculate,
for Hawaii to be self-sufficient,
When
when you're
you-
gonna produce
all right, you
saleable
asked,
crop to the housewife who looks for perfect produce.
when you ask the EPA for their ruling on the downside, the toxicity, they will always say, oh, but you gotta look at the benefits. I'm more than happy to look at the benefits versus the cost. If somebody would please tell me the cost, because if there's a hidden cost of health, you gotta weigh it against that benefit. Furthermore, we talk about diversity. Now, I grow stuff on my 2 acres, trust me, I can't grow everything for that. I trade, I can grow more than enough for my family of 4, fine, but I trade. And I don't use any chemicals, I'm just too damn lazy, and I'm afraid of burning my feet. But I don't grow everything to the max. Some stuff, half the crop is dead, and we eat the other half. But that's not, be very careful on diversity, we lecture on this too. You show a field all green. You want diversity? That ain't diversity, okay? Diversity, in my slides, has a brown spot in the middle. That brown spot, had the conditions been 180 degrees, would have been the only green spot. Furthermore, that brown spot is fallowed, and it might be the only green spot next year. I expect failure. I don't push 100% all the time. Plus, some of these chemicals, Dr. Hayes told you, at least in humans, weaken the immune system, or they weaken the immune system of the plant. Well, to me, that's a stressor, that you have to use other things to sterilize, or it's a sublethal dose and you stimulated mutations. Great, mutations can be good, but I don't like the fact that some of them are, in general, when a population is stressed, humans are stressed, that's how we progress, we mutate and move forward. But I don't want the charge to say, well, your daughter was one of the losers. I mean, that's not how we do it. You can do it with plants. The ones that don't survive die. You can do it with mice. The ones that don't survive die. But you dare not do it with humans. And if you do it with humans, I want to sign informed consent. Yes.
I have lots of questions, but the first one I want to ask is about the chemicals themselves, and on that table up there, when they make these chemicals, I see the ones that's in red, those are not good for human organics, okay? So when they make the chemicals themselves, they've changed that table.
Yeah, these are the elements.
These are the elements, right? And they've mixed these
Yes.
elements and changed them. And when they change them, did I have this right? They've changed them to what they call an inorganic or non-organic. And we're organic beings.
We're both, some of us have inorganic compounds like the iron and hemoglobin, but, okay?
Right,
We make the
right.
molecules.
So at some point, when they're changing it and
Yes.
they're trying to figure out if
Yes.
it's human-friendly, when,
Oh, now for pesticides, they really don't figure that out. They do some animal stuff, and we are not supposed to be exposed so much at these levels. We weren't supposed to be. Maybe they're using it correctly, but maybe it's a residue on the food, maybe it's in our water, but we're not supposed to be exposed as much. Because of that argument, they don't test it in humans, the pesticides, you don't.
but whatever it is, chemically,
Yes.
it's not friendly to humans.
You remember, you're looking at pharmacologically active things. If it kills a cell, a plant, a pest, an insect, it probably affects your cell. But there's a whole bunch of elements and chemicals that bounce off, like glass, sand, beach sand, silicon. But the ones they choose as pesticide to kill any pest probably affect us too. Or certainly your GI flora. That's a big lecture in itself. Yes.
I have an example of that. We need iodine, number 53 over there. We need our thyroid bathed in it, which runs our body's electrical system. Breast and thyroid and prostate need to be bathed in it, our skin. You get any chlorine, which of course they put in the water, it will, if you don't have your tissues saturated with iodine, the chlorine will go in those iodine receptors. And that's how, and the fluoride as well, and the bromine. The bromine is being put in flour. It used to be every slice of bread had a full day's iodine recommended daily allowance in it. They've taken out that iodine as of mid-1960s, and they put bromine in the flour now. So almost no one has enough iodine unless you eat seaweed every day. So if you don't have saturation of iodine, the chlorine will get in there. And that's how the doctors can get away with telling you you're allergic to iodine when they give you the iodine. The iodine will activate the chlorine to move out of your cells and will turn you toxic temporarily until you get it flushed out of your body.
See, two combinations, iodine and chlorine together, weird effects. Yes.
Okay, I have a quick question. So when it comes down to, I noticed you bringing up certain things like, autism and the results of these combinations. What I'm trying to kind of piece together here is where you have things like, for example, the psychosis in Caucasians from any certain given chemical combination. How would you go about attempting to derive correlations from these kind of chemical results as compared to how people are behaving? You know what I mean? The world is going crazy, and it may have something to do with, all these ridiculous combinations. And
Okay.
you guys all saw the first Batman, right? Michael Keaton? Remember the whole thing about the Joker and all these different combinations of chemicals, even within all the products?
Okay.
That's what I'm kind of getting at.
Okay, first of all, that correlation by Dr. Seneff of autism wasn't a combination. They don't enter that field. It was straight for glyphosate.
Okay.
Mine about the psychosis was a single compound mefloquine. Okay, but the question is, how would you correlate clinical symptoms with
Sociological
a person?
factors.
Sociological or markers?
No, this is beyond the realm of chemistry. This isn't exactly your purview. This is taking it into sociology,
No,
almost.
We can do that. That last slide I showed you was a very complex slide from the University of Chicago. they adjusted already for socioeconomic factors. So when it's adjusted, they're kind of made them equal, and then they still see this geographic, we can adjust for the confounders, they're called the confounders.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Yes,
More of a question of hope. Are there places in the world that have been as inundated with chemicals that we have in Hawaii that have been successful in getting rid of those companies, and how did they do that?
well, Sri Lanka, based on the chronic kidney disease unknown, they banned glyphosate, but then their minister overrode their ban and they have it back. Now, China and Russia said no GMOs. The mutations, with that, no GMOs, there's no reason to do 85 chemicals. So sometimes the practice of GMO farming, it's a whole different level. It's like the number of chemicals that doubled or tripled, but the combinations has exponentially risen. And the amount, I've seen the amount too.
So there are places in the world.
There are places, but generally, it's kind of like Maui. We have on the initiative now, no GMO practices. People say, are you afraid of the mutants or the chemicals? Kind of
They
both.
come together,
Yeah.
they party together.
Do you want to combine mutations and chemicals? We're this far from a lecture, on that. As you don't know the effects of combining chemicals, I claim you really don't know the effects of combining mutations and chemicals. The methylation, changing that three-dimensional conformation. Holy cow, you want to throw in a bunch of chemicals?
Question.
Yes.
If we get to ban Roundup, please don't record this, please.
This is live streaming, so
No,
this is
It's on the
recording.
internet right now.
if we're successful in banning Roundup,
Yes.
how would you replace weed control?
Well, what did we do for weed control before Roundup?
We pulled them,
First
right?
of all, well, not that bad. I saw guys, in the testimony at the Senate, some guys said, can we have a compromise? We don't want that hyper fog spraying of Roundup. Other guys say, oh, we used to do it I saw the weed cutters cutting. North Kauai, just, I don't know how they did it, just stopped Roundup on the roadside. They do that weed cutting thing. And don't forget, you tell me, you're gonna take away our jobs. Hey, we could get jobs doing
Yeah.
alternate to
Yeah,
spraying.
do something else.
Yeah, do non-spraying weed control. Now, if you say, well, that's backbreaking and not efficient, don't forget, I'm gonna ask you to tally the total cost of these things.
Kill your back, save yourself from
Weed control. On a road crew, you can hire more guys to go cut with a weed
Well-
whacker. And then you pollute the air with
Okay,
gas,
let me just
carbon
say-
monoxide.
I grow enough, I don't have outside people coming in to feed 4 to 6 people. I
So,
just,
How are
I
we
mulch.
gonna hire enough Mexicans to cut the weeds?
Well, first of all, I'll tell you a little secret. I hate to pull weeds, so I planted trees. And I trade the avocados and mangoes for the guys who grow vegetables. But, I mean, I have nothing against
There's
avocados.
always a
Don't be
solution.
so scared of weeds.
Weeds are good, you can mulch them.
Yeah.
You can eat them, actually, if you grow the right weeds.
I mean, this is big, half the air is weed.
You've got this like perfect sanitary thing, like you have
Correct.
to get rid of all these weeds, oh my God.
Weeds on the
Furthermore,
road are fine, I don't care.
You put too much spray on your weeds. Me, I compost my weeds and the chickens eat them.
Yeah,
I am not going to, my wife is not gonna let me spray anything on my weeds and compost to have the chickens who eat the eggs.
Yeah.
just
So-
pull them up and throw them down right where they are.
You spray the weeds with the wrong thing, there ain't no insects for the chickens to come to eat anyway,
Yeah.
because you got the idea.
Ant with a sledgehammer.
Next question,
I
yes.
just want to address this question. There's a lot of successful organic models and big farms, I'm talking big farms, that they don't use Roundup and they don't use these.
Organic farms don't use Roundup, I agree.
Right,
But I
and
mean,
so those are
but the major
models.
part of farming depends on chemicals.
Only for the last 40 years.
Yeah, thank you. Wasn't farming going on for 10,000 or 15,000
Yeah.
years?
You had more people on the farm.
Wow.
Had more sheep.
There was a wonderful panel here at UH on Thursday on sustainable
You have more people
farming,
on the farm and
on no-till
Very
farming,
local, which is
on
fine.
Korean techniques. There are other
Other
techniques
question.
that are industry scale.
Other question?
Wait, just a
Yeah,
minute,
that's
please.
smooth.
I want to draw your attention this way. I can appreciate the discussion that's happening right now, and I'm really happy that some of you from the audience have a little bit more experience in the farming area and can address that concern. But if you don't mind, tonight we have Dr. Pang with us, and he's addressing chemical mixtures and not necessarily farming practices. We'll try to bring more events to you that will allow you to have conversations around farming practices and alternative methods. But tonight I want to make sure that you get an opportunity to understand chemicals and the way they mix and the way they have an effect on your body. And I'm going to point you back to this flyer that we have here for one reason. This flyer lists 28 chemicals that are currently being used in agriculture. They're being used on the roadsides, they're being used in our golf courses, they're being used in our landscapes, right here in our state. That's what makes these important. Now next to that, they'll tell you what companies are using them. They'll tell you what crops they're using them on. Okay, so if you're wondering, what am I being affected by when the guy's growing corn up the hill from me, you can reference this chart. Okay, another reason why this chart, this little flyer here is important to you, is there's only 28 chemicals listed here. There are 90 being used in our state today, 90. Why aren't the others on here? They're currently confidential.
Brother.
Okay, why are they confidential? They're involved in a lawsuit right now. That's the lawsuit that's happening on Kauai. Eventually, you're going to get to know a little bit more about those other chemicals, but today, you don't. Today, they're using them. They're in your water. They're in your food. They're in your air. They're in your dirt. They are already affecting you. 90. That's what we're being exposed to. Maybe we only were exposed to 10 or 15, like Dr. Pang talked about earlier, when we were dealing with straight crops. Today, we're dealing with GMO crops. We're dealing with GMO testing. We're dealing with GMO seeds. And that increased our exposure. That's why it's imperative that we understand how it is affecting us when these chemicals are being mixed and what's being used in our island. So I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Pang, and I'm going to ask that you please keep your questions to the topic. Thank you very much.
Yes.
I think we made a really convincing argument, and I think the idea for moratorium is great. And I'm wondering, where are people having discussion about what the moratorium would be, or how it would be, what chemicals you would propose to be in the moratorium, or where can you participate in that sort of dialogue?
Maui has an initiative to ask for a moratorium on GM practices, and one of the arguments was because of excess use of pesticides. There are 5 citizens, I'm one of them, who will release the moratorium on certain things. All I'm asking is for a little more proof and consideration of these windows. I kind of gonna have to say that if humans are exposed to these things at these levels, I want to see human studies. And this is what we have designed and put on the international website. I challenge the women. You know the women who have 30% have glyphosate in their urine? Let's just follow the prenatal clinic, freeze the urine, and autism will declare itself in 1 out of 67 kids in 1.5 years. Go back and see whose urine was positive. We have to kind of do these studies.
Yes. Insist on them.
Well,
Yes.
there's not only the farming practices, but there's the whole practice of park and recreation, spraying and pissing all over everything. There's the roads, there's all of the above. It's on every level.
Okay. But you remember, I kind of researched the road control, weed control. I think they 4 or 5, okay.
Well, that's
It
plenty
ain't
for
90, but you get the idea. Yes.
The hysteria over chemicals in food. The problem is, the general gripe has been in the corn. And nobody in this room can prove that it is harmful. And nobody has died from GMO, period.
Okay, first
And
of
you can't prove that.
all, in the window, excuse me, in the window, when the babies are affected, you're 70 years old, They didn't use these chemicals associated with GM crops 70 years ago in this number.
Whenever you tinker with the seed, whenever you start messing around with it, you're developing, it's a GMO. They didn't call them maybe GMOs back in those days. It was hybrids or whatever. But it was an alteration of that seed, and that became a GMO.
I was playing.
Sorry, but GMOs are, there were
No.
seeds treated for germination, but there are specifically GMO crops.
I'm 70 years old. I'm living proof you can't survive GMOs. Thank you very much.
Let me just answer one question to this. There is something in epidemiology. I teach for the World Health Organization. It's called the healthy worker effect. Workers were dealing with uranium. And when you go into the uranium plant, all of them say, we're damn healthy, because the guys who were sick died. You are sampling of the people who survived. It's called the healthy worker effect. There's a gajillion publications on this, and this is a standard scientific approach.
That's right.
And standard scientific issue. Now, you're alive, I'm alive, but I see plenty of guys who didn't make it this far.
That's right.
Next.
My question is, can we address the actual chemical change from the table from that periodic table, that they've taken these elements from here and changed these elements, okay, and combination those elements and turn around and orchestrate it?
Okay. You're asking for the molecular, cellular, biomolecular mechanism.
Yes.
That's one aspect of the 4 pillars. The pillar that needs the most help now is the human stuff, because over the last 30 years we used more Roundup and we got more Celex brew, whatever. One group has to look back to look for the markers in the individuals. The other groups are looking for what you say, the chemicals themselves and how they affect the cellular stuff. This is how they showed tobacco causes lung cancer. They did simultaneous things. Another group will do the animal studies, and another group does, you cover 2 groups, the cellular and the chemical. Okay. So there are 4 groups, cellular, chemical, animal, and human. But we're working backwards now.
And orchestrating the actual effect it has, like, on different people.
Yeah, but you need the 4 evidence
Yeah.
to make the case. Yes.
Are there being epidemiological studies being done now? Like, say, for instance, you mentioned Kauai.
Yes.
What were the symptoms? Are
Okay.
they going to follow these people and the students that were affected?
Okay. Kauai is a very small area, and they first did a survey of Kauai for cancers. I saw the survey and I asked them, can you please lump together the South instead of breaking it in? I want all the people who are newcomers, the guys living at Barking Sands excluded, They will now are supposed to look at birth defects statewide, comparing the areas of GMO crops to the non. Unfortunately, this big chunk of data for several years is missing because there was some confusion if Department of Health or the university was going to do it, so we don't have it. But for the US, there's big time stuff being planned now. It's all secret. I was asked to contribute but excluded from the meeting. But you send in your 2 cents and you hope that they
Look at it.
have questions. No, that's fine. No, but apparently they're real nervous about, I'm not sure what. But I think, if we're going to ask for transparency, we should be transparent in return.
You mentioned one more thing, and that was you made a statement about how it's possible they're trying to sterilize the ground with all these different types of chemicals. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Okay. If you look in our soil, it's full of, even the Hawaiians will tell you, we love our aina, our soil. Right. But it's not a bunch of chemical dirt things, it's the microbes.
Right.
So the microbes include fungus, not all bad, bacteria, not all bad, viruses, there's some parasites, there's stuff we haven't discovered yet.
Nematodes.
So if your plant cannot handle those things, then they're what they call opportunistic. We see them with AIDS. AIDS die of stuff that you and I survive. But if your plant is weaker and you want your plant to grow, You gotta sterilize your soil out of everything. Because normal germs will kill it. It's kind of like AIDS or a cancer in the terminal stages when they have no immunity. Yeah, the boys in the bubble, they don't have immunity.
But there's no results of that if you do that. There's
Well, we don't know. Hey,
There's no tests or results of that.
Not
If they
only,
do that.
not only that, but the
you don't know what
long-term effect of these pesticides on your soil. Ever tried to grow stuff after the pineapple guys with their 15?
Nothing will grow.
Hey, well, the question is how long to remediation? With
Right.
pineapple, I don't know, 5 years. How long with remediation after 90 chemicals? I don't know. I
That's
don't know.
my point.
Why, hey, that's the point. So we're moving into these areas where we really don't know. I just argue about health, but if somebody wants to argue about environment, like we don't know what we're doing, be my guest. Now Hector Valenzuela, the ag guy, professor, he will talk about that part and the trade-offs to food.
Is there any studies on medical medicines that people take and the combinations of medicines and interaction?
Okay. The question is the drug. There was a reference I gave you.
3 or 4, 6, 7 drugs. And
There's, absolutely, especially in the elderly, there's a huge list of drug-drug interactions. Yeah, I kind of hinted at that.
like you said, the grapefruit and.
Right, absolutely. But we play the hand we're dealt. If I'm going to eat grapefruit, then somebody better tell me about Lipitor. But that is why with the classic drugs, they look at the chemical structure of some of these pesticides and plastics, and they said, that's an estrogen mimicker. That's a such a mimicker. And that's why we begin to worry about these things for what they did in animals and by their chemical structure. But did we test them in humans? No, because it's a pesticide, right? They're not, humans aren't going to get exposed. But when we are exposed, can I test that level in humans? Interesting question.
It's a good point.
Well, we cannot do it. We can work backwards with the markers.
Reverse engineering.
I can't dose the mother.
Game.
Hey, look, 30% of the mothers have kind of higher levels. If I knew that level, do I get to tell a woman who's pregnant, yeah, I want you to try this to see if you get an autistic kid?
No.
But they're already exposed. Oh, well, okay, so can we just work backwards and not expose them? During that study, already, this is why it's secret. Let's propose to see the outcome and then go back and find out what their urine level was during pregnancy. Wait a minute. You didn't tell these women during pregnancy that this could cause it? Well, we don't know it could cause it. That's why I'm doing the study. You didn't give them the option to, as best they can, try to avoid this stuff?
Now it's
Well, that's
lawsuit
a-
time.
Huh?
Now it's lawsuit time.
Well, that's why they
Right.
keep us all this kind of stuff.
That's why we're stuck in this little dilemma here.
Well, or we can all just try to inform each other and try to tell as many people as we can that a lot of this causes sterility.
You can do that, but you'll be challenged because you never proved it in those women. I couldn't prove it in the women. It's a little bit unethical, I think. But that's what we're exposed to anyway. Hey, my problem are with the regulators. Why wasn't this stuff done? And why are we trying to piece it together? The GMO list, the international guys. Where's the EPA? Where's the EPA? They're busy trying to preempt you.
The regulators just came from the chemical companies and now the regulators.
Well, no, to be fair, there's some really good guys in the EPA and FDA, and they write the letters that these guys above us are really ignoring the science. One just came out, I forgot the guy's name, he just retired. Of course, they do it after they retire. Whoa, you should hear what he has to say about the EPA. You should, and I presented the GMO, what the scientists have to say about the FDA. The FDA scientists, what they say about the FDA. Oh, so something is a little bit
And
amiss here.
Monsanto eats organic only.
Well, don't forget, that's what the women tried to do too, and 30% positive, 70% in Europe. So this is a little more than just self-defense. We need some kind of normally, I regulate drugs. I never appeal to the public. I myself can barely pronounce the name of the drug. But, it's all behind the scenes. Now what? Yes.
So is it, as a doctor, what health measures can you suggest to eliminate some of the pesticides and heavy metals?
Detox.
Okay.
Yeah, how do you
The
neutralize it?
question is elimination and control. First of all, it starts with control. Don't put any more in, especially when we don't know what we're doing, including combinations. A lot of these chemicals cannot, I don't know how to eliminate them. When the window is affected, I think Tyrone Hayes will tell you that. Tyrone, the guy who came said, look, the grandmother's passing it to the mother was never affected, but the baby has it. Some of the stuff is like irreversible as you go through the window to your next generation. Tyrone and I can't prove this, but the studies have not been done. So can we not do this? Because what? We're growing seed corn to feed the animal. I thought we were supposed to feed each other. We're growing seed corn to feed the animal. Or are we growing seed corn for the other guys to actually eat that? Then I have an issue with GM food here. But the official Department of Health comment is we're not actually worried because we don't eat the seed corn we grow except for GM papaya. Yeah, but somebody's eating it, and if they're not eating it, then you're feeding it to animals. What happened to feed the world?
Animals aren't meant to eat corn.
That's another issue. Maybe they're not also meant to eat corn laden with glyphosate. There's some studies coming out about that.
Anything we eat, like when we eat them, we get toxic like.
Called second passage. His issue is you eat the animal, then you eat that, now what? Okay, don't forget, 10 times the number of gut bacteria than cells. 10 times the number of gut bacteria. Glyphosate is considered an antibiotic. Do you think it's killing all your bacteria? No. It's sublethal dosing them. What happens with sublethal dose? Mutations. Are mutations all good or all bad? I don't know. But sometimes it's winner take all.
So, I still got this one question. Is there any studies going on concerning how to get the toxins out of our body? There's nobody studying?
We don't know what the toxins are. Each toxin, you remember that cell model? Has a different clearance. Some keep it from coming in, some pump it out, and some degrade it and efflux it. It depends on each toxin. You can't lump them together. It's kind of like drugs. Is there some way to clear myself of drug? What drug? Each one different.
Here's a body burden.
Yeah. Yes.
So with this one thing, and this is, trying to read this thing. So it says in here, Minnesota researchers explored the interaction of exposure to pesticides, gene expression, and dietary factors contributed to autism. Among other things, they found that mineral deficiencies linked to high fructose corn syrup is not then, makes them more susceptible to neurotoxic effects of pesticides.
Okay.
Oh, great.
No, but wait, in general, some people would say this agent causes that, but it goes through a common pathway. Sometimes it's depletion of the essential minerals, glyphosate is a chelator, or just straight fructose. So sometimes there's a common pathway that they all impinge on. Sorry, Corey, you had a question?
Oh, yeah. What are 2 or 3 things you'd like to see happen in Hawaii to make the pesticide situation better?
Well, first of all, I really believe that the moratorium that's on the initiative for Maui is correct. We're not asking for a ban, but we're asking for somebody to show us all the effects underlying this thing. And we'll weigh it against the benefits, but I want to see what the side effects are. And the question is, can't we just have business as usual while we do it? Really? Come on, the answer is no. You weren't supposed to do it to begin with, the EIS, and you really shouldn't do it now. Just like we, when the key ignition for the car, GM car doesn't work, and we try to figure out what exactly went wrong, we recall the cars. We don't say, well, it's business as usual while we figure out what's wrong with the key ignition.
No.
Sorry, you had another question? Oh, that's the one thing I want. Yes.
You've already alluded to it, sir, but it doesn't affect everybody the same way.
Correct.
And bottom line.
Correct. It doesn't affect everybody the same way, like a drug. And when that's true, and I'm about to give you a drug, you give written informed consent. I'd say there's a 30% chance of this,
20% chance of 1% of something, no bad, but it's informed consent. Now, if that's really what we have to do, then I want that idea promulgated.
And the moratorium, is it on the use of the chemicals? That's what the moratorium in Maui?
It's on GM farming practices. And that
Including,
includes- yeah,
so GM seed crop plus the chemical
yeah,
blanket
yeah.
moratorium.
Now, I think Southern Oregon passed it too, and it's moratorium, and they have 1 year to stop and do something else or move or something. So Oregon passed it. Of course, they'll be sued and challenged.
One comment.
Yes,
Your sublethal dose
yes,
theory also applies to humans, right?
yes,
So some of us die and some of us survive.
yes. In fact, when we get, when the sun, when we lose our ozone or whatever, the dinosaur days, there's a huge variation and mutations
Those
of,
of us are survive
yes,
are more
yes.
genetically.
Yeah, that's how we move along. But, if something were to happen to give a sublethal dose to me and my family, and my daughter said, hey, Dad, we died, but you survived. I'd be really mad. Especially when someone else is doing it.
Yeah.
If they're going to mutate us, and some of us will be great and propagate for the new world of aluminum in the soil, I wanted to see informed consent that my daughter or my wife might be in this group that's not right.
That's right.
That's where it crosses into eugenics, if it's being delivered.
Yeah. But of course, right now it's so random, no one really knows. So all we can say is, well, we kind of don't know, but we are moving ahead in, to withstand more solar radiation. Okay, some guys who didn't do it, too bad for them. Yes.
So a lot of this depends on different DNA.
Correct.
In the genome.
Yes.
Like like Asians will be affected, but
Correct.
white people won't be.
Correct, or vice versa.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so obviously it depends on the inherent genome, and until we kind of figure that out, I want informed consent. It depends on your genome, good or bad, I have no idea. Can you kind of monitor us so that when things get bad, you can stop? I have no idea.
Well, now, does that mean that they want to do DNA testing on everyone to see what's?
Not until we know what markers correlate with the outcomes.
Mhm.
Oh, in fact, that's what we know that. Another malaria drug, there's a malaria drug, Primaquine. For some people with the wrong genetic makeup, Mediterranean strain. We test that. You got Mediterranean strain, you don't take this drug. The rest of us take it. The Asian strain, frightening effects, but they don't die. So we know that, if we know what the markers mean.
There was a time, a little while back, there was a cure for AIDS called Compound Q. And a while back, this Compound Q supposedly was in the market, and this professor discovered it, and it didn't work on certain ethnic groups.
Yes.
So therefore, the EPA would not let it go public.
Correct.
Because there was certain ethnic groups. It didn't do all 4 ethnic groups.
Correct.
Basically. Okay.
I remember now.
You remember now?
Yeah, I remember the ethnic groups.
Whatever happened to that mess?
I don't know.
It's just
But-
like
but-
it fell off the radar.
No, don't forget though. I believe that Compound Q, it affects different groups, and some guys might benefit. I think they had a better alternative. They said, look, we got this compound X that helps everybody. So not only do you look at the single compound, but you look against the alternatives. And this is the thing about chemicals.
Right.
Can we just go back to the days when we did 15, 10, with a little more organic stuff, a little more mulching, something?
Mhm.
Yes.
I have a question, but let me not get totally distracted, but here in Hawaii, we're no different than anywhere else in the entire nation. We're facing the exact same effects of the last 100 years of terrible practices agriculturally. We're all facing the same problem as far as we've been taught that monoculture is the sweet way to go, and as a farmer personally, if I have one row in a greenhouse with 3 rows, that one row of all the same thing, that's enough of a monoculture for it to be decimated. But there's organic compounds that definitely work for pesticides. You don't have to use Roundup. You can use onions, cayenne, and garlic with a little bit of Dr. Bronner's soap. that shit will kill 99% of everything that's on there. You just have to do it twice as often. It washes off in a couple weeks. Same with like moon oil and azetrol. All these, there's 100 ways of doing it. But the main point is we're not special. We're on the same fight as everybody else. I've been in Oregon, I've been in Idaho, I've been in California, I've been all over the West Coast, and they're all fighting the same fight as we're fighting. It's that we're used to being able to go buy vegetables at the store with a blind eye, and then be like, this is sweet, I get my vegetable, I don't have to ask any questions. We should be growing very small quantities of vegetables for ourselves and our neighbors, and that's how agriculture should definitely work. But my question is you just referenced a, like an aluminum tolerant variety or something. So are you familiar with the aluminum tolerant variety C that is, based for tropics because of the high acidity soil? And what are your thoughts on that?
Okay, the question of aluminum. There's a whole lot of aluminum. I think it's the second most common element in the world.
Next to barium.
Because of industrialization, aluminum dust is coming out of China, comes across to the U.S., crosses the U.S., crosses the Atlantic, Europe, and goes all the way around to China again. The dust goes everywhere. Aluminum dust is occurring in high levels worldwide. So there was some stuff raised by the genetic modifiers. Should they modify the plants to withstand higher aluminum levels or take advantage of the aluminum? I don't know too much about that, but industrialization is almost synonymous with aluminum dust and aluminization of the soil.
What about chemtrails?
Don't get me started on that.
That's a whole
That's a
other
whole
can of
topic in
worms.
itself.
They're dumping it in the air.
That's too much. Next week.
Next week.
Too much too soon.
I have comments about that, but we'll talk about that later.
Yeah.
It's a mess.
Don't start that yet.
Oh, give us a little bit.
A little bit?
Yeah.
Sure.
I was asked by Maui, they said they saw chemtrails every day. So I went to them and I said, you really do? They said, oh yeah, I can see them, I can see them. I said, well, I'm not sure, but you can see them. So they kept diaries. 3 people kept diaries. One did a remote satellite. I can see chemtrails. For 3 months, they kept diaries each day, north coast of Maui, different people. I had a student who needed a project. She caught rainwater every day. I talked to the guys in California, Dane Wiggins or something. He said, after it rains, you can inspect the thing, don't wait too long. They spray the chemtrail, you catch it. Some days no rain, some days too much rain. But we got enough days with just amount of rain. Sent it off to the lab to test for aluminum blindly. And they listed all the different levels. Then I met them and said, okay, what do you think? I want you to list your diary, high, medium, low. See if there's a correlation with the aluminum level. First of all, there was no high aluminum level, and there was no correlation in anybody's diary. But if you read the literature, chemtrails, you're supposed to put aluminum gas, it combines with oxygen, makes aluminum particles, reflects the light.
Right.
Okay, you can do the same thing with seawater. When we initially looked at depleted uranium in 2001, it was clear my phone was tapped. The state senators said their phones were tapped too. I told the guys, don't tell me by phone when we're going to do the project. I'm supposed to meet you in a cafe. So it's so easy to disprove everything, because when we do our study, you spray with seawater, you get the same visual effect. And then, of course, you don't show aluminum, so therefore you just disprove chemtrails. I told them, never contact me before calling me about, oh, we're finished with the study. We're going to start the study. So what I'm trying to say is there's a terrific way to monitor for aluminum. It's cheap, it's pretty good. But if they catch wind of you monitoring, it's sprayed with seawater. Disprove it. But we saw no correlation whatsoever with the 3 diaries and the remote satellite sensing for aluminum. Barium, strontium, and the other markers.
Yeah, be kidding.
But anyway, look, you take a look, you give it your fair shot. That's how we all agreed. This is the study. Yeah, we agree.
Is that diabolical?
Say again?
Is that diabolical?
Oh, hey.
That's real life.
That's worse. You don't want to hear about.
Within the past year, I met a fellow behind the bus stop who worked at the airport and went in with his phone and took some pictures inside of a plane that's doing the chemtrail
Oh, yeah.
at Hilo Airport.
Now, I heard through the grapevine that somebody forgot to turn off their chemtrail emitter and landed.
I saw that one.
Whoa, talk about the smoking gun. If you can pin that down, then that's very different. Okay, so figure out who reported that.
Why are they doing that? That's what.
Oh, well, first of all, to me, because it was published in Science News, and David Keith David, he gave a TED talk on this. It's a great way to cool the earth by reflecting off the light. And it's cheap and easy to do. And his point was that, I hate to tell you guys you can do this, because it's like telling a guy who smokes, I got a cure for lung cancer, so the guy never quits. But the bottom line in the article is, some guys die of chemotherapy of lung cancer.
Exactly.
So David Keith says, hey, I tell you we can solve this by chemtrails, but we might die of the effects, because although you reflect the heat, you still got acid from the CO2 you burn, and you acidify the ocean. There's plenty of stuff you're going to die of still yet. So he felt really bad about saying you can do it, but you can do it for cheap, reflect sunlight off. Then there's all these people who say it's for mind control and stuff. Just reflection of sunlight is not. Okay, good. Come to the next lecture, I'm not here, Hector in the debate. Okay, they'll talk about ag stuff, you can ask all your ag questions there. And then I will leave my slides on the laptop. There's references if you want to look at them. And I hope you enjoyed Dr. Hayes.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pang. That was a great lecture. Really good, right? Yeah. We're just gonna double check on the time and the room number for the next event. Did you have a question?
If we wanted to show this to our friends and family, where is it recorded? Where is it available?
It's being recorded. Right now, when we do have the videos available, we'll post you a link on GMO-free Hawaii Island, that's .org. We're also on Facebook, you can look us up there, and we do all of our sharing, primarily through Facebook and through our website. We do have an email news list, and if you'd like to find out about upcoming events, please sign up. It's at the top of the room. Okay, let me just double check on the date and time for Thursday's event.